All right, guys, we can get started, right? First, I wanted to show you the format of the Scantron that you'll have on the final. It will be a bit different than before. This is how it would look like. It's a big sheet. Of course, you would fill the answers here. You also need to indicate the test version that you have. You need to put your name. And here the date and the room, the information that you have for the exam. The most important part here is the ID number. You need to fill in an ID number like that. So you would be supplied the ID number, I think by tomorrow or later this week. So you will know your ID number coming to the final, and you're going to need to put it here and also to fill the circles as well. That's the way we're going to identify the student. The ID number is going to be what links you to the database in Blackboard, I think. All right, so this is how it would look like. And now we're going to go over So now we're going to go over the sample exam that your professor posted. Okay. All right, so the first one we have the cost structures of a perfect competition. All right, so this is a firm in perfect competition. We know the average total cost, we know the average variable cost, the marginal cost curve as well. The first question is, at a price of $6, this firm will, what would it do? So first of all, we know that in perfect competition, what is the decision rule? How does the firm decide how many units to produce? And not only in perfect competition, in general, what's the decision rule? Well, the general decision rule is marginal revenue equals marginal cost, right? Whenever the marginal revenue and the marginal cost intersect, that's how we find the optimal quantity, the profit maximizing quantity. So the decision rule is marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Now we have perfect competition though, and what do we know about the marginal revenue of a perfectly competitive firm? It's horizontal and equal to the price. So because we have perfect competition, the decision rule becomes marginal revenue equals marginal cost, but marginal revenue is also equal to the price. So now we have price equals marginal cost. That's how we decide how many units to produce. We're given here that the price is $6, right? So $6 is here. Therefore, the marginal revenue is just a horizontal line at the price, right? And we need to see where it intersects the marginal cost curve, right? And this happens at this point here, which is approximately a quantity of what? 9. All right, so we know the profit maximizing quantity for this firm would be 9. All right, so if that's the case, at a price of 6, this firm will it increase profits by increasing output from 9 to 11? If they increase output from 9 to 11, would profits go up? No, because we know that 9 is the profit maximizing quantity. So the first one is not true. Is it true that they would shut down in the short run because it's losing money? Are they going to shut down? What is the shutdown price? What does the price need to be for the company to shut down?
Total cost? Average total cost?
No.
Has to be negative, right?
No.
Below average?
It needs to be below average variable, below the minimum of average variable cost here. Right? So at the minimum of average variable cost, that's where the marginal cost curve intersects the average variable cost curve at its minimum. At this point, with a price which is about, what is this, $4.25 or so, right? At this price, they would be indifferent between shutting down and operating, right? Because if they operate, the revenue that they get would be exactly equal to the variable costs, right? But it would still not cover the fixed costs. And we know that the fixed costs are going to get paid in the short run, even if they don't operate, right? So at this price here, they're indifferent between operating and not operating in the short run. Okay? So since the price is higher than that, it's $6, then they would not shut down. True? So this is not the case. Would they exit in the long run only if price falls below $4.25? Is that the only price at which they would shut down? They would exit in the long run. What's the exit price? Sorry?
Anything below 425?
That's the, well, all right, that's the shutdown price. There's a difference between shutdown price and exit price. One refers to short term, the other refers to long term. Okay, the shutdown price is the minimum average variable cost when the marginal cost curve intersects the average variable cost curve. That is the shutdown price in the short run. The other thing is the exit price, which is relevant in the long run. Why would they exit in the long run? If they don't make any profits, right? If they don't make any, if they experience a loss in the long run, they're gonna exit the industry. And what is the price at which they, below which they lose money? Put it this way. Below the minimum average total cost. So below, what is this? $10, right? So at a price below 10, they would experience a loss, and in the long run, they wouldn't want to stay in that industry if they experience a loss in the long run. So they're gonna exit. Right? You guys should be very familiar with this. Okay? So we have a shutdown price, which is minimum average variable cost. That's a short run. In this case, it's $4.25 or so. And then we have an exit price of $10, which is the minimum average total cost. You got a question?
I was just reconfirming what you just said, Lily. So $10 would be the long run exit price.
Below 10.
Below 10.
Right, so below 10, we'll have exit. All right, so this is also not true. And then the only answer that remains here is that they would continue to operate in the short run. All right, that's true. So the answer is D. They would continue to operate because in the short run, even though they experience a loss, right, that revenue that they get by producing and selling the output is helping them cover at least a bit of the fixed costs. Right? And if they shut down, then they would, all of the fixed costs is going to get lost.
Basically, both the two words to remember, the difference is shutdown means average. Excuse me. Shutdown means the average variable cost, and exit is minimum average total cost.
Right, exactly. That's the case. So keep it straight. Shutdown is a short-run phenomenon, and the price at which they would be indifferent between shutting down and operating is the minimum average variable cost, right, which is where the marginal cost curve intersects our average variable cost. And an exit price is the point at which they would break even, basically, right? They would make zero profits. Below that, they have no incentive to stay in that industry in the long run. That's the minimum average total cost. And we know that the marginal cost curve is going to intersect both the average variable and the average total at its minimum. Okay?
So that goes for both short run and long run.
That is generally true always. All right, so we know that at the price of 6, they would continue to operate in the short run. We also know that they would produce 9 units. All right? So the answer is D. Okay. If the price of the good is $16, what is the firm's profit? Okay. So now the price is 16, which is here. The same rule is going to apply, right? They want to maximize profit, so, and this is perfect competition, so price equals marginal cost is going to apply here as well. Now the price is though 16, and where it intersects marginal cost is right there, and this corresponds to a quantity of what? 13. All right, so now that the price is $16, the optimum quantity is going to be 13 units, and they obviously operate, right, because the price is higher. Are they experiencing a profit or a loss? A profit, because the price is going to be higher than average total cost here, right? And now we need to find out what this profit is. And profit, the formula for that is total revenue minus total cost, right? So it's total revenue minus total cost. Now we can express that equation. We know total revenue is price times quantity, right? Price times quantity. And we know the total cost could be expressed as quantity times average total cost, right? So average total cost times quantity, that gives us total cost. From here we can factor out the quantity. So profit just becomes the quantity times price minus average total cost. Well, I know what the quantity is. It's 13, right? I know that the price is 16. The only thing that I need to figure out is what's average total cost at that quantity. And I can just figure that out from the curves. So at 13, average total cost is here, which is what? This is 11, this is 10, it's kind of in the middle, so it's 10.5. Right, do we see that? At 13, average total cost is about 10.5. Okay, so then profit becomes quantity, which is 13 times price, which is 16, minus average total cost, which is 10.5. What is this? 13 times 5.5, that's 71.5. Okay? So profits in the short run in this case would be $71.5. Any questions? Okay, the answer is A. All right. Now we have, suppose the demand, again the same picture, but the demand is given by this following equation, which is demand equals, the price equals 54 minus 2Q. All right, so demand equals 54 minus 2Q. Quantity is given in thousands. Now this is the market demand, all right? The quantity is given in thousands. Price is in dollars. What is the long-run equilibrium number of firms in the industry if the demand remains fixed? So I'm after the number of firms in the long run. How can I find that? Remember, I have perfect competition. What do I know for sure is going to happen in the long run? What's the profit that companies are going to make in the long run? Zero. All right? So we know that in perfect competition, in the long run, firms make zero profit. At what price would that happen? What's the price that's going to cause all firms to have zero profits? Right, the intersection between marginal cost and average total cost, or the minimum of average total cost. That's the break-even point here that we talked about, right? So in the long run, I know that there's going to be adjustments. Firms are going to, if there's a profit in the short run, firms are going to enter the industry and lower the price. If there's a loss in the short run, some firms would exit the industry and increase the price for the others. But at the end, I know in equilibrium, what's going to happen is that no firm is going to make profits. They're all going to have zero profits, and the price would adjust to that, would guarantee that. So the long run price, whatever happens, I know it's going to be $10. Okay, so the price in the long run is going to be $10. That's the only price that, the question is how did I get that price? That's the price that guarantees that all firms are going to make zero profits in the long run. All right, at that price, how many units is each firm producing? 11. Right? So I know that each firm individually, in the long run, is going to produce 11 units. Now I know the price. I know what each firm would do. I need to know, given that information, I also know what the market demand is. Okay? So now I need to find how many units consumers are going to demand in the long run at that price. Right? I know the price is going to be 10. If I plug in 10 in the demand equation, I'm going to find the total market demand. True? This is the demand curve. All right, so let's do that. So plug in 10 in the demand curve. 10 equals 54 minus 2QD. So 2QD equals 44, or the quantity demanded equals 22. But this is in thousands, right? Because this is the market demand. So it's 22,000. Okay, so now I have the following problem. The quantity demanded is $22,000. 22,000 units. Each firm is going to supply 11 units in the long run. So how many firms there need to be? Right? That's all there is to it. So the number of firms in the long run would be the quantity demanded in the long run, which is 22,000, divided by what each firm individually is going to produce in the long run, which is 11. So now I'm going to have 2,000 firms. All right, any questions?
Can you explain how you got to the 2,000 again? From the second part, 2QD equals 44?
Can I explain this part? I know the long run price is going to be 10.
Yeah.
If I plug in that in the demand curve that I have, the market demand, and solve for the quantity. Right? I plug in that. I'm just solving this equation for Q. All right, so the answer here would be B. Okay, it's another scenario. We have two fishing boats. They fish the same waters year after year. There are two ways to fish, moderately and intensively. If they both fish moderately, the fish population is steady, and each boat's profits are medium. If one boat fishes intensively while the other fishes moderately, the intensive boat's profits are high, and the moderate boat gets nothing. And if both of them fish intensively, each boat's profits are low. Okay? So what best describes this situation? Do we have a common resource problem? Yes, right? Because they fish the same waters. The fish is the common resource. Is that an example of the tragedy of the commons? Yeah, right? And is that a prisoner's dilemma too? Yeah, okay. So all of the above. So the answer here would be D. All right, the same scenario, but now the question is, what is the Nash equilibrium outcome? Now, the easiest way to do this is to set up the table, right, with each players and their strategies and see what happens. I'll do this here. So we have boat 1 and boat 2, right? They both have two options, either fish intensively or moderately, right? Intensively or moderately. Now we need to figure out what each boat is going to get as profits in the intersection of all those strategies. Okay, so if both boats fish intensively, what does the problem say is going to happen? If both boats fish intensively, they each get a profit of low. Okay, so here the first square have low, low. If one fishes intensively and the other moderately, it says that the one that fishes intensively is going to get high profits, and the other one gets 0. So here, intensively, moderately is going to give the intensive one high, and the moderate one 0. And the same here. The one that fishes moderately gets 0. The one that fishes intensively gets high. And finally, if both of them fish moderately, each boat's profits are medium. All right, so to determine the Nash equilibrium, in any game that there is, actually what you have to do is to consider, first take the position of one of the players and consider their best response given the other guy's choice. So for example, if I'm player 1, or boat 1 in this case, all right, first I ask myself, what should I do if the other guy chooses to fish intensively? What's best for me? Fish intensively as well, because in the first case I get low, and if I decide to fish moderately, I get nothing, and low is better than nothing. Right? So the first guy is going to choose intensively if the other guy fishes intensively as well. Now, again, I'm player 1 or boat 1. If the other guy chooses moderately, what's my best choice? Now, well, if they fish moderately, I can choose between intensively with high and moderately with medium. What should I do? intense, right? Because it gives me, again, higher profits. And that's it. I'm done with that guy. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but from the perspective of the second boat. So I'm here, I'm that guy, and I'm asking myself first, if boat 1 fishes intensively, what should I do? Also fish intensively, because then I have the choice of either low or 0, and low is higher than 0, so I would go here. Okay, then if boat 1 decides to fish moderately, which gives me higher profit, what should I do? Intensive as well, right? Because I get high versus medium. All right, so what happened here? First of all, is there a dominant strategy for player 1? Fish intensively is dominant for player 1. Is there dominant for player 2? Same thing, right? Because no matter what, they're going to choose that strategy. And then the Nash equilibrium, basically, if you want to simplify this, the Nash equilibrium is a square in this table that both of them are going to choose. And what's the only Nash equilibrium here? Both fish intensively. Right? You can approach any game theory problem in that way. Analyze the choices of each of the players given the other player's choice. And then if there's an intersection at some of the outcomes, that's the Nash. There could also be no Nash equilibrium. There could be more than one. Right? In this case, there's only one, and that's both of them fish intensively. So that would be A. All right, same scenario. What is the socially optimal outcome? All right, so if they didn't consider this as separate profit maximizing entities, right? But if there's an entity that cares about social welfare, right? What would they force those boats to do? To fish moderately, both of them to fish moderately. And that would preserve the population of fish, and they would get moderate profits. All right. So this would be the socially optimal. And that would be answer, what is it, C? Answer C. This is question 7. Again, we have cost curves, the demand curve, marginal revenue curve, quantities in thousands. All right. Suppose this image represents costs and demand facing a single firm, a monopolist. What is the largest profit this firm can make if it can only charge one price? All right, so what does the monopolist do? What's the decision rule? How do we find the optimal quantity to produce?
See the intersection of marginal revenue and marginal cost.
Just as before. The optimality happens at wherever marginal revenue equals marginal cost. This was exactly like before with perfect competition. The difference is that here marginal revenue does not equal price. All right? They're facing downward sloping demand. All right, so marginal revenue equals marginal cost. This will give us profit maximization. And the question is, what is the largest profit this firm can make? All right, and the largest profit would be, first of all, the quantity that would maximize profit would be whenever marginal revenue equals marginal cost, which is this point, and it equals quantity of 4,000. Right, so I know that the profit maximizing quantity would be 4,000. And what would be the price? 8. All right. So now when we find the quantity, then we go up to the demand curve, and that gives us the price. And the price in this case would be $8. And as before, we know that profit is either total revenue minus total cost, or we could represent that as quantity times price minus average total cost. Right? Quantity we know is 4,000. The price we know is going to be 8. And at the quantity of 4,000, what is average total cost? It's 6. All right? well, 8,000. Right? So the maximum profit, if they are allowed to charge only one price to all customers, would be $8,000. Any questions? All right, so the answer is A. All right, again, suppose this is cost and demand facing a monopolist. Suppose there are no fixed costs, right? So the average total cost curve does not apply anymore. There are no fixed costs if the industry was instead perfectly competitive, where the marginal cost curve was equal to the industry supply. What is the increase in total surplus relative to monopoly? All right, so in other words, if this picture represented perfect competition instead of monopoly, what would total surplus be? Or what is the difference in total surplus in the two cases? Well, we know that what happens in perfect competition, the price is going to equal the marginal cost. All right, and in the industry generally, if this is the supply curve, right, that's the marginal cost curve here, we're assuming that this is the supply in a perfectly competitive industry. So basically, it will be the point at which supply equals demand. All right. So if we have, instead of monopoly, if we have perfect competition, the outcome would be a quantity of 6 at a price of 6. All right. That will be the outcome. This is also, we know, going to be the outcome that maximizes total surplus. The question is, what is the increase in total surplus relative to monopoly? So total surplus when we have a monopoly, we know that this was the answer here, right? We had a price of 8, a quantity of 4. So basically the monopolist restricted quantity in order to increase the price and derive more profits. Total surplus would be, in the case of monopoly, would be this part here, right? And total surplus when we have perfect competition would be this whole thing. All right. So the difference between the two was just this triangle over there. And what did we call that? Deadweight loss. All right. So this question, in other words, is what is the deadweight loss of monopoly? And we have all the information given here. So the deadweight loss is a triangle. The base is, what is this? This is 4, and this is 8. So the base would be 4. Right, so deadweight loss would be 4 times. And what's the height? It's the difference between the quantity in perfect competition and the quantity in monopoly, which is 2. 4 times 2 divided by 2, it's 4,000. Okay, so deadweight loss due to monopoly would be 4,000, which is C. All right. Suppose the image represents cost and demand facing a single firm in a monopolistically competitive industry. All right, so now we have monopolistic competition. Suppose demand is always linear, and the slope of the demand curve at any point in time is always -1. All right, so basically the slope of the demand is not going to change. If the firm does not update its product, what can we expect to happen over time? All right. What is the, we know in the short run, monopolistic competition is the same as monopoly. Right? It's exactly the same. They have a differentiated product, so they can afford to restrict quantity and increase the price. But what happens in the long run? What was the difference? In the long run, monopolistic competition allowed for what? Entry and exit. Right? All right, so let's see what's going to happen here. Again, in the short run, we had basically the same outcome as monopoly, right? They're going to charge 8, and they're going to produce 4,000. What happens in this industry in the long run if it's monopolistic competition? Is this firm making a profit or a loss? in the short run?
Profit.
It's making a profit. So what is that going to cause in the long run?
They're gonna stay in business.
It's going to stay in business, but what's going to also happen in this industry? Entry, right? Profits are lucrative. So other firms are going to enter this industry because monopolistic competition allows for entry and exit. Right? That's how it's different from monopoly in the long run. And when more firms enter, what's going to happen with the demand curve? Now, more firms, the monopolistic competition is allowed to be a monopolist in the short run because they have a differentiated product. Right? So for their individual product, they're facing this demand. However, if more firms enter, they're going to take away some of the customers of that guy. And what that's going to cause is a decrease in demand, which means a shift in demand to the left. And the demand, we said, is going to have exactly the same slope. So what it's going to do is just shift, shift, shift until, what is it? Right here somewhere. Until we reach a point at which it's no longer profitable for that guy. Right? There's no incentive then for anybody else to enter or exit. Right? So the monopolistic competition in the long run, still nobody makes a profit. Right? But what's the difference between that and perfect competition? Well, profits are zero, but they're no longer at the minimum of average total cost. Right? And the price is actually higher than the marginal cost, which is what we call markup. All right? So monopolistic competition in the long run, still zero profits, but we have an optimal point that is at the decreasing phase of average total cost instead of the minimum. And the minimum is called the efficient scale, and we're not producing at the efficient scale. And also, we do not charge a price that is equal to the marginal cost, which is the most efficient thing. We have a markup still, because this is marginal cost, and this is what's going to happen in the long run. All right, so we started here at a price of 8, quantity of 4,000. So what's going to happen in the long run? The answers are, it will sell more than 4,000 units at a price greater than 8. Is that true? This particular firm. What is it going to do? It's going to sell less than 4,000 at a price that is lower than 8. Right? Do you see that? Because this point, the price is lower and the quantity is lower as well. Okay? And that's, I think, answer D. No. What is it? You can't see it, but it's D. It will sell less than 4,000 units at a price less than 8. That's answer D. Question?
So all that really happens in this is that since it's a monopolistically competitive industry, the demand curve is going to shift left, which drives the price down and the quantity that they sell down.
Right. So the question is to explain again what's going on. So in the short run, because they're making a profit in this case, right, more firms are going to enter. And entry was not allowed in monopoly. That's why the monopolist in the long run can sustain that positive profit. In this case, we allow entry. Other firms enter this industry. And because the products are a bit differentiated, some of my customers are going to go to that other firm that enter. And what that does is it takes away my customers, which kind of shifts my demand to the left. It decreases my demand, the demand that I face. It's going to keep doing so until I make zero profits, and then there's no incentive for any other firms to enter. And if it were the other way around, so if we had a picture where the company was actually experiencing a loss in the short run, right? Some of the firms in that industry are going to exit in the long run, which is going to drive the demand up, right? Shift to the right now, again until it reaches the point at which zero profits are made. All right, that's what happened here. All right. Okay, so we have an airline. There are two types of travelers, business ones and vacationers. For a particular flight, there are 100 business travelers who would be willing to pay $600 per ticket, and there are 50 vacationers who will pay $300 for a ticket. Right, so willingness to pay. There are a total of 150 seats available on the plane. All right, the cost to the airline of providing the flight is $20,000. and this is kind of fixed. All right, so it doesn't really depend on how many passengers are there. It includes the cost of pilots, flight attendants, fuel, etc. Right, so basically no matter how many people are in the plane, they're still going to pay the 20,000 only. All right? How much additional profit can the firm earn by charging each customer their willingness to pay relative to charging a flat price of 600? Right? What's the additional profit that they can get? So first of all, at a single price of 600, all right? So what's the profit if the price is 600? Well, what's total revenue? And equals total revenue minus total cost. What's total revenue going to be at 600? 600 times 100, because this price is only going to capture the business travelers, and there's 100 of them. The other one, the 50 vacationers, are not going to buy a ticket because it's too expensive. So this will be the total revenue, and we know total cost will be the 20,000, no matter what. All right, what is the profit if they can price discriminate now? Well, so what that means is that they're going to charge 600 the 100 business travelers. All right, so total revenue would be still the 600 times 100. But they can also charge the 50 vacationers, what was the price? 300. All right, so the total revenue is going to have an additional $300 times 50 people, the 50 vacationers. And then total cost would be still the 20,000. Okay? The question is, how much additional profit can the firm earn? Additional meaning what's the difference between the two? Well, the cost is the same. This part is the same. So the only difference is the additional revenue that they get from the vacationers. All right, and that's 15,000. Okay, any questions?
What if there was more people than seats?
All right, the question is, what if there's more people than seats?
Yeah, because like in this case, it adds up to 150.
Right, in this case it adds up to, well, then,
Did they ask that?
well, they will only still be able to seat however many seats they have. So if you're saying if there were 100 vacationers who will be willing to pay 300, is that what you're saying? Well, they'll give seats to only 50 of them.
Well, what if there's both of like business and vacationers? You would just choose the business ones because they would pay more?
If there was more business as well,
Yeah.
well, of course you would want to charge them. You want to fill the plane with business travelers. That's the best option, right? Because it gives you the highest revenue. But if you are not able to do so and still have some empty seats, you're better off giving them to the people with lower willingness to pay. But of course, if you have 150 people willing to pay 600, go ahead. Just seat them only. All right, so here the answer would be A. All right. The market demand curve is 1,000 minus 10Q. The market is controlled by a monopolist. Fixed costs are 10,000, marginal costs are 20Q. Okay. So we have a monopolist with the following curves. What is the profit maximizing output? All right. What do I know about the profit maximizing output? Where does it happen? Marginal revenue equals marginal cost, right? So marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Well, I have the marginal cost, it's 20Q. But what's marginal revenue? Do I know that? I'm not given that formula, but I do know that the demand curve is 1,000 minus 10Q. From there, I can derive marginal revenue. We know that the marginal revenue curve is going to start at the exactly same intercept as the demand curve, but it's going to have twice the slope. Okay, so the marginal revenue curve then is going to be 1,000, the same intercept, but the slope would be doubled. So minus 20Q. All right, now that I know that, I can equate this to marginal cost, which is 20Q. and solve for the quantity, right? And that's going to be my profit maximizing quantity. What is it? 1,000 equals 40Q. So the profit maximizing quantity would be 25. Right? That's answer A. Profit maximizing output is 25. Okay, same scenario. What is the monopolist's total revenue at the profit maximizing output? Right? So I'm after total revenue now. Not profit, just total revenue. Total revenue is price times quantity. Well, I know the quantity is 25, right? So I need to find the price. What is, if the profit maximizing quantity is 25, what is the profit maximizing price that the monopolist is going to charge? How do I find that? Plug in 25 where? In the demand, right? Here, not in the marginal revenue or marginal cost, but in the demand curve. All right, so it's the profit maximizing price then would be 1,000 minus 10 times, and that's 25. So it would be 750. All right, so the total revenue then will become 750 times quantity, which is 25. What is this? 1875. I think. Yep.
For the previous question, how do you know to involve the marginal revenue in the demand equation?
All right, so for the previous question, how do I know to...
Like, why are we plugging in the marginal revenue in the demand equation?
What am I... I'm not plugging the marginal revenue in the demand equation. I need to... The decision rule, the profit maximizing rule, is when marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That's what I need to figure out. I don't know what marginal revenue is. It's not given. But I know how to find it, because I know that the marginal revenue curve in monopoly is going to have exactly the same intercept as the demand curve, but it's going to have twice the slope. Right? In any monopolistic picture, this is what we have. This is the demand, this is the marginal revenue. I need to find the formula for the marginal revenue curve in order to solve the problem. And I do that because I know that they start at the same point. That's 1,000. But I also know that this is going to have twice the slope. Slope here is 10, here it's 20. And I just solved that to get the quantity.
And why are you setting it equal to 20 here?
Because that's my marginal cost. I'm after this point, right?
Oh, okay, they give that to you.
I'm after this point. I need to know what this quantity here is. Question?
I'm not, because you got 10 and 20s. I know that marginal cost is half of marginal revenue, or the other way around. Because it's both lines, they start at the same point.
Right? They start at the same
minimum
point.
is half of the actual.
The marginal revenue curve has twice the slope of the demand curve. Since the demand curve has a slope of 10, then the marginal revenue is going to have a slope of 2 times 10, which is 20. And that's why this is 20. All right, we answered that. Total revenue was 18,750.
So we're solving for the quantity in the marginal revenue equation. And that's the maximum quantity.
We're solving for the quantity in the marginal revenue equation. Marginal revenue equation is marginal revenue equals that.
Yeah.
I have two unknowns, marginal revenue and quantity. I cannot solve for quantity from here. I'm solving this equation, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Right? This is my equation that I'm solving.
Is that an equal sign or a minus sign after the marginal revenue?
Equals. All right, I could have done this without that part. Right? So marginal revenue equals that. And then plug that into the marginal revenue here. Plug the marginal cost here, the equation that I have, and then solve. Right? Then I would have 1,000 minus 20Q equals 20Q. which is marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And from there I get Q.
I see. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Same scenario. How much profit is the monopolist earning? All right. How much profit? Okay. Profit equals total revenue minus total cost. Total revenue I found out in the previous problem, right? That was 18,750, right? So now I need total cost. So to find total cost, I can figure out the average total cost and multiply by Q, but here I don't have information on that. So the other way to express total cost would be it is the sum of variable cost and fixed costs, right? That's always the case. Fixed cost I know. That's 10,000. It's given in the problem. All right, so this is 10,000. Now I need to find variable cost. I don't have variable cost given, but I do have the marginal cost curve. All right, so the marginal cost is 20Q. That's its formula. And the quantity that optimizes profit that this firm is going to operate at, I found out first. That was 25. All right, so it's somewhere here. All right, by definition, variable cost is going to be the area below the marginal cost curve above the x-axis. So variable cost is the area of this triangle. If I find the area of this triangle, I know the variable costs, plug it in here, find the total cost, and then plug it in here to find the profit. Those are the steps. All right, so this is a triangle. It's a right triangle. In this case, I have one side is 25. And what would be the other side here? What is this? Well, I know the marginal cost is 20Q, right? So at Q of 25, what is marginal cost? All right, 20 times 25. Get the calculators out. All right, so I have both sides of a right triangle. Therefore, variable cost is going to be 25 times 500 divided by 2. 25 times 26, 25. Okay, now that I know variable cost, total cost is that plus the fixed cost, which is 10,000. So it's 16,250. Now that I know that, I plug it in the profit equation, total revenue I had from the previous problem. So I got 18,750 minus 16,250, which is 2,500, which is profit. All right, so the answer here would be D. All right. Okay, assume that the government breaks up the monopolists in order to create perfectly competitive market. Assume the marginal cost is now the industry supply. By how much has consumer surplus increased from breaking up the monopolists? Okay, so now we need to know the increase in consumer surplus moving from monopoly to perfect competition. In this case, it will really help to have a graph, and we know all the points. We found all the points so far. So let's try to figure that out. The demand curve starts at 1,000. Then we have marginal revenue, which is somewhere here. All right, so this is the demand curve. This is the marginal revenue. We have the marginal cost, which is starting at 0, 0. All right, this is the marginal cost. And what do I know? I know that they intersect at this point, which gives you a quantity of 25. Right, that was the optimal quantity. the price I found was 750. Right, that was the monopolist price. What was this point? I just found that as well. That was 500. All right. So that's what I know so far. I'm going to need to figure out some other things. But first, let's see what is in the monopoly case, what is consumer surplus? Well, consumer surplus is above the price, below the demand curve. Right? In a monopoly, this is the price. And this is the demand curve. So this is consumer surplus in monopoly. Agreed? Now, if I instead have perfect competition, I know that the outcome would be the intersection between supply and demand, right? So I'm going to have a certain quantity here. That's going to be the outcome of perfect competition at a certain price. Okay? And in that case, what's going to be consumer surplus? Well, if this is the price, then consumer surplus is going to be this whole thing under perfect competition. So the question here is, by how much has consumer surplus increased in comparison to monopoly when we have perfect competition? So consumer surplus in monopoly is going to be, this is a right triangle, the area of this little red triangle here. All right? The right triangle, this side is 25. This side is what? 250 divided by 2, which is 625, 3125, I believe. All right, so this is the consumer surplus in monopoly. The consumer surplus in perfect competition would be, well, it's again right triangle. So this side times this side divided by 2. I know neither of those yet, but I can find them. And how can I find the quantity? What is the outcome in a perfectly competitive market? What's the decision rule here? The demand is going to be equal to marginal cost, right? Because I'm told that the marginal cost curve represents the supply. So the rule here is going to be whatever the marginal cost equals the demand curve, that's our optimal quantity and price. And I can figure that out. I know both of them. I know the price, the demand curve, which is, right? So here this would be the decision. Price should equal marginal cost. The demand curve is 1,000 minus 10Q, right? Not marginal revenue, no, just the demand curve. 1,000 minus 10Q equals marginal cost, which is 20Q. So 1,000 equals 30Q. Q equals 33.3. This is, we need to round a little bit here. All right, so the quantity, the optimal quantity in perfect competition, this point here is going to be 33.3. And how do I find the optimal price? How do I find that point? Plug that in. Plug that in either the marginal cost or the price or the demand curve, you're going to get the price. If I use the demand curve, the price equals 1,000 minus 333.3, right, equals 666.7. All right, it's not exact number. So this point here is 666.7 approximately. Okay, now that I know those 2 points, what is consumer surplus in perfect competition? Well, we know this side here is 33.3, right? Times, and what is this side here? What is that? Right, it's 333.3. That whole thing divided by 2. All right, that's not an exact. It depends on how much you round. You're going to get a bit of a different answer. But you'll be able to figure out what's the closest, right? So the answers are far enough away from each other so you can figure out what's the approximate rounding here. All right, so this is 5,549.4. Right? And this is consumer surplus under perfect competition, consumer surplus under monopoly. The difference between the two gives you the increase. And the difference is 2424, so 2,424, and this is the closest one. Sorry? There it is. All right.
149.4.
Sorry?
That's the 49, right?
Yeah.
5,549.
Yes.
That's divided by 2 also?
That's not divided by 2. That's the answer. Sorry? The difference between that and that. Right? The question is, what is the increase in consumer surplus? So the answer would be consumer surplus under perfect competition minus consumer surplus under monopoly, and that's 5,549.4 minus 3,125, and that's approximately 2,421, depending on how much you round. All right, any questions? All right. Okay, same problem. Now the question is, what is the deadweight loss associated with the monopolist relative to the perfectly competitive market? All right, so now I'm after the deadweight loss. Well, I already have the picture, and I know that the deadweight loss would be the increase in total surplus under perfect competition compared to monopoly. We had that before. It's the area of this triangle here. And I already calculated everything I needed in the previous question. All right. So to find the deadweight loss, well, the base of this triangle, I know this point is 500 and this is, what is it, 750? So the base is 250. And then the height would be the difference between the quantity in perfect competition and the quantity under monopoly. All right, so that's 33.3 minus 25, and the whole thing divided by 2. So it's 125 times 8.3, which turns out to be approximately 1041. Right, and I can answer this easily because I already calculated everything in the previous problem. Now, if I didn't have that, I knew those points before, so the only thing I would need to figure out without the previous problem would be the optimal quantity under perfect competition. Right, this 33.3 here. All right, any questions? So the answer here is C. Okay, we have a duopoly, so an oligopoly with 2 firms, A and B. Each firm must decide how much output to produce, either 2 or 3 units. Right, so this is a game. And the strategies are either 2 or 3. We have 2 players, and the payoffs are given in the table. In this game, all right, so let's play the game and see what happens. As before, I'm going to start this looking from firm's A perspective. All right, I'm firm A. First question is, given that firm B chooses 2, what should I do? If firm B chooses 2, what quantity should I choose? 3, right? Because that gives me 12 instead of 10. And if form B chooses 3, what should I do? 2, because that gives me 8 instead of 6. All right? Now from the other form's perspective, I'm B. If A is to choose 2, what should I do? 2 or 3? 3, because it gives me 12 versus 10. And if A is to choose 3, what should I do? 2 or 3? 2, because it gives me 8 versus 6. All right, so in this game, it's about dominant strategy. Which player has a dominant strategy? Neither, all right? Because there's not one single strategy that they're going to choose no matter what, all right? It's not true that form A, for example, is going to choose 2 no matter what form B does. They're going to choose either 2 or 3 depending on what form B does. And the same is true for B. There's not one single strategy that they're going to choose no matter what. So in this case, neither player has a dominant strategy. It's A. And which of the following outcomes represent the Nash equilibrium in this game? What do you think? We said that what's a Nash equilibrium?
The most profit.
Where they intersect, right? When the decisions intersect. So basically, if you circle one of those twice, all right, so if you circle one of the payoffs here twice, either as player 1 or player 2, then that's a Nash. So how many Nash equilibria do we have here? 2, right? Those are both Nash equilibrium because they are rational given the other person's choice. In other words, form A, given that form B chooses 3, form A does not have an incentive to choose 3, right? It has an incentive to stay here, and vice versa. That's the definition of a Nash equilibrium. All right, so we have 2 of them here, so the answer would be D. Sorry. Yeah. All right, so now we have a bit more complicated game. We have 4 different strategies for each of the players. The reasoning remains the same, right? You look at it from one person's perspective, given the other person's choice, decide what's best. All right, so we need to figure out what the Nash equilibrium is. And again, if we follow the steps and there's a square in this table that both of them are going to choose, right? That's a Nash equilibrium. So from form 1's perspective, okay? If form 2 chooses W, what should I do? B, all right, because that gives me the highest 5. If form 2 chooses X, what should I do? B again, because that gives me 8 compared to the others. If they were to choose Y, what should I choose? A. If they were to choose Z, D, right? Because that gives me 7. All right, so we're done with form 1's choices. Now form 2. If form 1 chooses A, what should I do? Sorry? All right, I'm form 2. If form 1 is to choose A, what's my best strategy? X gives me 8. Can I do better than that? W. All right, this is 9. All right, if form 1 is to choose B, what should I do? X, because that gives me 5. The other ones are lower. If they were to choose C, what should I do? W. And if they were to choose D, X. All right, any Nash? Just one, that one, which is B and X. Right? So here the answer is A. All right, same problem. And the question is a total of how many actions can be eliminated by the iterated deletion of dominated strategies. So basically, if I keep eliminating strategies that would dominate every other strategy, how many of them can I eliminate? Since we already solved for the Nash, the way we would look at this, we would start by seeing whether one of the strategies, any strategies can be eliminated because it would not be chosen. So for form 1, is there a strategy that would never be chosen? No matter what, they would never choose it.
X and Z.
For form 1, that's not the
Oh,
option for
D.
form 1. Is there one strategy that 1 would never go for? C. There's no red here. All right? They would never choose C. I can eliminate that. There's no red. All right. What about for form 2? Y and Z. They will never choose them. All right? Now, if you think of this logically, that's the iterative part. If firm 2 would never choose Y and Z, then firm 1 should not even consider what they would do if firm 2 were to choose Y and Z. Right? Does that make sense? They know they would never be chosen, so it doesn't even matter, right? I wouldn't even consider it as an option. Okay. So I can eliminate those 3 right away. Now, an easy way to proceed would be just to figure out what's left and whether we can eliminate something else as well. Kind of create a new table, but with only the choices that are left. So for 1, I only have A, B, and D now. And here I only have W and X. All right, so this is 2, 9, 5, 4, 3, 3. And this is 6, 8, 8, 5, and 7, 4. Okay, so now let's play the game again and see whether we can eliminate more. I'm again person 1. If they were to choose W, what would I choose? B. If they were to choose Y, what would I choose? B. And right at this point, I can eliminate 2 more. Right? Because it would never be, since 1 would never either go with A or D, I can eliminate those as well. If I eliminate them, that means that Y doesn't need, firm 2 doesn't need to even consider them. The only thing that they need to consider then is what? If they were to play B, which one would they choose? Y, because it gives me 5 and this gives me 4. All right, so now is there another strategy that never gets played?
W.
W. All right, and what happened at the end? The only strategy that I didn't eliminate, the only 2 actually, were B and Y. Right? The strategy, there's 8 strategies, A, B, C, D, W, X, Y, Z. All right? I kept eliminating them, right? Because at some point I can eliminate some of them. And then if I considered only what's left, I can keep eliminating strategies until the only ones left are B and Y. So I can eliminate 6 out of the 8 strategies that I have, which is the question.
So the elimination is only firm 1?
No, we started there. If we could have started the other way around, we would still end up eliminating that.
Yeah, because right here at the end, it's 8.5, and then the other one is 5.4.
There's not 5.4. These are 2 different payoffs.
Yeah, 5 and 4.
Okay.
But the other one is a totally higher payoff for 1 than the other. So he would probably pick 5 and 4. But I see this whole is getting how many you eliminated.
I don't understand your question.
No, the payoff
Okay.
is 5 and 4, whereas the other payoff is 5 and 8.
All right, but those are decisions made by assuming what the other person would do. So if I'm person 1, and I think the other person is going to go with Y, then I'll choose 5 because it's higher. You have to keep this straight, all right? You have to ask the right questions and do this step by step. First, consider it from one player's perspective, given the other person's choice. How many ever choices? Here you have 4 choices each, right? The other tables you had 2, you might have 3 or 5, doesn't matter. Just keep it consistent. If the other one is to go this way, what should I do, right? And if they were to go that way, what should I do? And keep going, and then consider the other person's perspective as well. It is always going to be the case that this payoff, the first payoff is to the player 1, and the second payoff is to the player 2, what they get. So be careful there. But it's, as long as you follow the steps, you should be okay with these types of problems. All right. There a question? All right, so suppose a firm fixed costs are 50, marginal cost is 10 plus 2Q. Industry demand is 40 minus Q, where it's in thousands. If the firm operates in a perfectly competitive industry and the price of the good is $30, what is this firm's optimal short-run quantity? All right, so what is the profit maximizing decision? Marginal revenue equals marginal cost, always. All right, marginal revenue equals marginal cost. But we have here perfectly competitive industry. So what is that also equal to? The price. All right, so in perfect competition, price equals marginal cost. Well, the price here is what? 30, it says. And marginal cost, I know the formula, it's 10 plus 2Q. Now I can find what's the optimal quantity produced by each firm in the short run. Agreed? Yeah? All right, so 20 equals 2Q, or the quantity is 10. That is A.
Wait, how did you get 30?
How did I get 30?
The price.
Well, it's given. The price of the good is 30.
Oh.
All right, this is straightforward. If the firm operates in a perfectly competitive industry and the price of the good is 30, so same scenario, how many firms produce this good in the short run? Okay. Now, in the short run, I know each firm is going to produce 10 units. True? What is the total demand? Is the question here. All right. If I know the total quantity demanded, I can just divide that by how many units each firm produces and get the number of firms in the short run. Well, in the short run, I know the price is 30. I also know the demand curve, right? The demand curve is 40 minus quantity demanded, and that is in 1,000. Right? So if the price is 30, I can just plug it in. That equals 40 minus the quantity demanded, or the quantity demanded equals 10,000. Right? Because it's in thousands. So if the market demands 10,000 units, each firm supplies 10 units, how many firms are there? 1,000 firms. All right, so the number of firms would be the quantity demanded divided by, how do I say this? The optimal quantity of each firm. So it's 10,000 divided by 10, or 1,000. There are 1,000 firms here. The answer is C. All right. Suppose a monopolistically competitive firm operates in the short run at a price above its average total cost of production. In the long run, the firm should expect what to happen? Sorry? Exactly. All right, so we have here monopolistic competition that has a price above average total cost, which means it has profit, right? It's making money. What's going to happen in monopolistic competition, as we saw before, because of the profit and there's no barriers to entry, new firms are going to enter this market, the demand curve is going to shift to the left, right? And therefore, the new firms will enter, price is going to fall, and the price in the market is going to fall as well as the demand curve shifts. So all of the above. All right, the answer here is D. Okay. So we have the marginal cost average total average variable for perfect competition. All right? It's perfect competition. If the price is P1 in the short run, this is the price in the short run, what will happen in the long run? All right, so the price is P1, the price is $6. This is short run. What's going on with those firms? What are they doing? Right, this is perfect competition. We know the rule is price equals marginal cost. So they're here. That means they're producing at a price above average total cost. So they're making a profit. And what's going to happen in the long run in that case, because it's perfect competition? Firms will enter the industry. B. And that's it. They will enter the industry, and what will be the price in the long run? What will be the price in the long run? P2, whatever P2 is, right? $4.50 or something. Okay, what if we were at P3 in the short run? Then we'll get exits, right? Again, until the price reaches P2. Perfect competition. All right. Okay, suppose a competitive firm is producing 500 units of output. So Q is 500. The marginal cost at 500 is 17. Average total cost at 500 is 12. And the price is 20. And this is perfect competition. Okay, so first question is, at that quantity 500, the firm's profits equal what? Well, we know profit, total revenue minus total cost, or quantity times price minus average total cost, which is more reasonable here since we have all of those. Well, quantity I'm told is 500, price is 20, average total cost is 12. All right. So 500 times 8, 4,000, sorry, 4,000. It's $4,000. That's the profit in the current situation. Let me ask you this. Is this current situation profit maximizing? Which is the next question. What should the firm do? Is it profit maximizing? No. What's the profit maximizing rule in perfect competition? Price has to be equal to marginal cost to be profit maximizing. All right? And since they are not, then we know that the quantity of 500 here that we have would not be the quantity that maximizes profit. So what should the firm do? We know that it's not C, right? Profit is not maximized. To help you think of this, we should probably draw the graph. All right, so we have average total, marginal, All right, quantity is, well, we know that they're making positive profit, right? We know that we are above average total cost. At 500, let's say it's somewhere here, okay? We know that the marginal cost is 17. We know that average is 12. And we know that price is 20. Right? So the profit maximizing would be when price equals marginal cost. So the profit maximizing will be here. We need to increase marginal cost. We need to move up the marginal cost curve until we reach 20. And that will happen at a quantity that's higher than 500. Right? Does that make sense? So what they should do is increase output to increase economic profit. So it's A. Okay? All right, we have monopolists. They have a fixed cost of 1,000, and they have constant marginal cost of 2. If the monopolists were able to perfectly price discriminate, how many units would it sell? All right, remember the picture. It always helps now. Sometimes it helps to draw the picture so you can see what's going on. Right, we have the demand, we have the marginal revenue. And we have marginal cost that is constant at 2. All right, so it would be a straight line at 2. This is 2. This is the marginal cost. Okay, if they cannot price discriminate, we know that they're going to produce here, whatever that is. And they're going to charge whatever that price is here. But they could. Okay, they could perfectly price discriminate, which means that they're going to charge everybody exactly their willingness to pay up until what point? When are they going to stop charging? Well, when they're going to stop selling? At this point, right? Because after that, it's not going to be worth it. So they're going to charge everybody their willingness to pay. But at this point, they're going to stop. And that means they're going to sell quantity of what? It's actually the perfectly competitive outcome, right? When the monopolists can perfectly price discriminate, they are going to achieve the perfectly competitive outcome, where marginal cost equals the demand curve. All right. However, they're going to do this at the expense of the consumer. So they're going to capture all consumer surplus. All right. So what is this quantity here? 900, where price or the demand curve equals marginal cost. Marginal cost is 2 everywhere, right? So it's 900. They're going to produce, they're going to sell 900 units. All right? The answer is C. All right. I have 2 cigarette companies. If neither company advertises, they split the market and earn 50 million each. If they both advertise, they again split the market, but then the profits are lower by 10. So they only earn 40 each. If one company advertises while the other does not, the one that advertises gets customers from the other and therefore makes 60 million, while the one that did not advertise makes 30. What will the 2 companies do if they behave as individual profit maximizers? Okay. So this is a game that's given in words, so I need to put it into a table. We do that, then we can solve as any other game. All right, so I have company 1, company 2. They have 2 choices, advertise or don't, right? So they can advertise or not, and then advertise or not. And now I need to figure out just what the payoffs would be in each case, okay? what am I told? If they both advertise, all right, so let's start from the beginning. If neither company advertises, then they get 50 each, right? So not advertising gives them 50 each. If both of them advertise, then they get 10 less, so 40 each. And then if one does and the other does not, the one that does gets 60 and the other one gets 30. So if one advertises and two does not, one gets 60, so the first number would be 60, and the other one gets 30. And this is reversed here. When one doesn't, they get 30, and when two do, they get 60.
So they both have to advertise.
Right. Let's solve the game as before. I'm from 1. If 2 decides to advertise, what's my best choice?
Advertise.
Agreed? Advertise, because it's 40 versus 30. If they decide not to, what's my best choice? Advertise, because it's 60 versus 50. All right. And you can see the same is going to happen with the other firm, right? Now, from two's perspective, if one advertises, what do I do? Advertise, because it's 40 versus 30. And if the one does not, 60 versus 50, again advertise, all right? So it turns out in this case, both of them have a dominant strategy, which is to advertise, all right?
Whenever there's a prisoner's dilemma, they will both have a dominant.
Yeah, that's the general idea. So they both advertise. The Nash equilibrium is when they do. And that's, what is it? B? Yeah. So the answer here is B. And what would a social planner do? Or if they were allowed to collude, right? If they're allowed to sit down and come up with a strategy, commit to a strategy, what should they do?
Not advertise.
Not advertise, right? Because that gives them 40-40 is the outcome when they don't communicate, right? When they don't collude. So they're better off if they sit down and commit to not advertise, and both of them get 50. The problem with that strategy is that it's not sustainable in the long run, right? Because if they commit to this, then each of them has an incentive. So from one's perspective, right? I committed to that point here, 50-50. But in the long run, what if I believe that 2 is going to be truthful and stay at and not advertise, then by cheating, by advertising when I promised not to, I can get 60 instead. Right? So that's why in the long run that type of collusion is not sustainable, because they both have an incentive to deviate from the agreed upon action, and eventually they will. All right, B. 28. Regulating natural monopolies by making them set price equal to marginal cost would cause what? All right, so what was the characteristic of a natural monopoly? What creates a natural monopoly? No one?
Could be like high fixed costs.
Okay, high fixed costs, which results in
Natural monopoly.
a natural monopoly with what's,
Profits.
sorry?
Higher profits.
What's the main characteristic of a natural monopoly in terms of its costs? There's a lot of fixed costs, but what does that imply? If there's only fixed costs, let's think of it this way. If there's only fixed cost, no variable cost, as you increase quantity, what happens to average total? Decreases, all right? So the main characteristic of a natural monopoly is a constantly decreasing average total cost. All right? It's just more efficient for everybody to have only one firm servicing this market because of the decrease in average total cost. All right? So basically what's going on is you have, again, demand marginal revenue, and so on and so forth, but you have an average total cost that is decreasing. This is average total, sorry. This is demand. This is marginal revenue. And how is marginal cost going to look like here? We know that marginal cost intersects average total cost at its minimum. True? Well, it's a curve, yeah, but it's going to intersect way out there, right? So I don't know how to draw this. Maybe this way. All right, so basically marginal cost is always going to be lower than average total cost, at least in the interval that we are considering here. That makes it a natural monopoly. All right? Because if it were to intersect or move above the average total cost, then that would mean that we've reached the minimum of average total cost. And we know by definition it's going to be decreasing. So it cannot start increasing. All right, so what they would do, naturally, they're not regulated. That's what they would do, right? Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. All right. So if you force them instead to produce, set the price equal to marginal cost, that's that point, and what's going to happen then? There will be a loss. All right? The monopolist would operate at a loss. Why? Because the price is going to be lower than the average total cost. Simple as that. The other ones are not true because would it result in less than optimal total surplus? The price equals marginal cost is the optimal total surplus, right? That's what perfect competition does. Would it maximize producer surplus? We know it's maximized here, right? When they're not regulated, when marginal revenue equals marginal cost, not where the price equals marginal cost. Would it result in higher profits for the monopoly? Well, obviously not. Question?
How do we know if they'll still operate, like if it's short term or long term? Does that matter?
How do we know whether it's a short term or long term? This is a monopoly. There's no short term, long term.
So marginal cost is always less than average total cost.
So the marginal cost is always going to be, well, yeah, in a natural monopoly, by definition, it will be, because for it to be above, for the marginal cost to be above average total cost, it would need to, well, average total cost needs to be increasing, by definition, right? In general, what happens is, this is average total cost and this is marginal cost. We know it's always going to intersect average total at the minimum here. And whenever it's higher than average total cost is going up. When it's lower, average total cost is going down. All right? So because we know in natural monopoly average total, we're kind of in this portion only. That means it's always going to be lower. All right? Does that make sense?
And because if you set the price equal to marginal cost and it's lower than the average total cost, then they're
Right.
operating at a loss.
So because the government is forcing the monopolists to set the price equal to the marginal cost, and we know marginal cost is always lower than average total, therefore price is going to be lower than average total. Okay? Therefore, loss. A. All right. So we have 4 different graphs. Which of those depicts a short-run equilibrium that will encourage entry of other firms into a monopolistically competitive industry? Okay. So monopolistic competition, what needs to be true in the short run in order to encourage entry? Profit. All right. So we know in the short run they behave as a monopolist, right? So they're going to produce always at marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and the price they charge is going to come from the demand curve, just like a monopoly. So in this case, are they making profits, loss, or zero? Zero, right? Because the price is going to be equal exactly to the average total cost here. So profit 0. Here, loss, right? Because the price is actually lower than average total. So there's going to be exits there in that industry in the long run. Here, profit. So that's the one, all right? Here, the average total is below the price, so they're making a profit, which would encourage entry. And this is not even monopolistic competition, right? Because the demand is horizontal, so that's perfect. All right? So answer C here. All right. Game. How many pure strategy Nash do we have in this game? Same as before. So, from A, I'm from A. So from 1, I'm from 1. If 2 is to choose X, what would I do? B, right? Because it gives me 7. If they were to choose Y, what would I do?
C.
C, right? Because it's 4 higher than the others. If they were to go with Z, B, because it's 9. All right, and then 2. See, at this point, this goes. We know that. So we know that 1 would never choose A. So we can basically eliminate. We can even not consider it. But for practice, let's consider it too. So if they were to choose A, all right, I'm from 2. Okay, my options is X, Y, and Z. If from 1 were to choose A, what would I do? X, because it's 4 versus 2 versus 3. If they were to choose B, which one would I go with? Y, because it's 8 versus 7 versus 6. And if they were to choose C, what would I do? Y, because it's 6 versus 5 versus 4. So how many Nash? 1. Okay. All right. We have demand, price, and quantity, right? Each operator or each producer pays a fixed cost of 200,000 to provide the channels, and the marginal cost is 0. Right? So this is an example of kind of perfect natural monopoly that we're gonna see, right? Because there's only fixed costs, each firm would be producing at the decreasing portion of its average total cost, right? Average total cost would be just decreasing. Okay, so we have only fixed costs of 200,000 per firm, and this is the price and quantity of the demand curve. Assume there's 2 companies in this market. If they're able to collude on the quantity of subscriptions that will be sold and the price that will be charged, then their agreement would stipulate that. All right, so now we're allowing them to talk to each other and to commit to a certain strategy. All right? And they're going to, when they do so, what's going to happen is they would behave like one, right? They will behave like one firm. Because they're colluding, even though it's 2 firms, they will behave like a monopolist, in other words. So what they're going to do is they're going to choose a quantity and price. Well, quantity corresponds to a price, so they're going to choose quantity and price that maximizes total profits, just like a monopolist would do, right? Monopolist doesn't care how, the monopolist doesn't care how much. A monopolist is just one firm, so they care only about their own profits, put it that way, all right? And here, when they collude, is as if they're a monopolist, as if they're one firm. So they'll maximize the joint profits. Does that make sense? So we need to figure out at each quantity what's going to be the total profit. And whenever it's higher, that's the one that they agree upon. And that's exactly the one that the monopolist is going to choose as well. All right, so at each quantity, I need to find the profit. This is easy, actually, because it's total revenue minus total cost equals the profit, right? But total cost, I know it's going to be, because there's only fixed costs. All right, so total cost is just going to be the fixed cost. And there's two firms, each of them has 200 fixed costs. All right, so the total cost is always going to be 400,000. Right? That's for sure. And then total revenue is quantity times price. Multiply and figure it out. All right, so here total revenue is 0. Here it's, what is it, 450. 720. 810. 720. 450 and 0. All right, this is just quantity times price. And then profit would be the difference between the two. So it's minus 400 here, 50, 320, 410, 320, 50, and 0. No, and minus 400. All right, so what's the profit maximizing? What's the maximum profit they can get together? 410. So a monopolist, right? If there's only one firm, that's what they would do. They would sell only 9,000 units, so they would restrict the quantity to 9,000 units, which would raise the price to $90. And that's all there is to it. All right. So the only difference when they collude, the only difference is that between that and monopoly is that they would share the profits. Right? Each firm is going to get half of that. Each firm is going to produce half of the output, get half of the profit. So each firm will charge a price of 90, and each firm will sell 4,500, because at 90, the total demand is 9,000. So if there's two firms, each of them is going to do 4,500. Question.
Yeah, sorry. How did you get the total cost to be 400?
How did I get the total cost to be 400? It says that each cable operator pays a fixed cost of 200.
So you divide.
No, so there's two operators. There's two firms. Each of them has a cost of 200. All right. So total. I'm interested in the total here. All right. Because as I said, they behave as if they are one firm. If they were one firm and each of them pays 200, then that one firm would pay 400. And there's no marginal, so there's no other costs. All right, so that will be B here. Now this question is very involved. If they don't collude, what happens? And then they play a game, but it's actually it's a bit more complicated. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip this, and we'll send you a video solution. There's a video solution in MindTap of exactly this problem. It's kind of involved, so I would save that for. It's on. Have you seen Ted Joyce's videos? There's videos on MindTap of solutions of problems after the chapter. It's right there, but we will point out where it is. The solution to that particular problem. It's a lot of calculations. All right. Well, let me just say this. The basic idea when they don't collude is just like before when we saw that if they agree on this, 90 and 900, all right, that could hold for a little bit, but then both of them would have an incentive to cheat. Right? It was just like before. Both of them would have an incentive to increase quantity, right? So that they can sell more, they can increase profits. But if one does that, then the other one's going to do the same as well, right? So what's going to happen in that equilibrium is that both of them are going to end up cheating, right? Exactly like the advertising, not advertising game, right? So both of them are going to end up cheating and actually producing at a lower quantity and getting less profits than the monopoly case. Which is it good or bad for them? Definitely bad, right? Because they're making lower profits. But what about the consumer? Is it good or bad for the consumer? Good, right? All right.
Assuming that scenario, right? When one firm does it, he gets over on that first.
Sorry?
When They decide to collude,
Okay.
right? And then one decides to cheat. When he does that cheating, he gains profit.
Right. So the question is, if they collude and then one of them decides to cheat, then they would earn the profit. That's not actually true, because let's assume this all happens in one shot. Okay? We agreed right now that we're gonna collude, and what we also do is decide whether it's optimal for us to cheat or not. Then both of them are going to arrive at the decision to cheat. All right? When both of them cheats, both of them get lower profit. Does that make sense? So ultimately there's going to be no agreements. What was the example for that? Oh, I deleted. That was the advertising, not advertising. But here, the idea is that if there's only one shot, all right, so they don't have time periods or whatever. Today we meet, decide on something, and tomorrow we implement the strategy. Today we decided to collude. Individually, then going home, each of those CEOs is going to sit down, play the game, and see that if they decide to cheat, they'll be better off. But then the other CEO is going to do exactly the same, come to the same conclusion. So what's going to happen tomorrow is that this agreement that it's not going to matter anymore. Both of them are going to decide to cheat. And when both of them cheat, things become worse for both of them. Because things were only better if one of them cheated and the other one stayed truthful. All right? But since both of them came to that decision, both of them cheated, both of them suffered. All right? All right. Which of the following is not a barrier to entry that leads to the rise of monopoly power? Right, this is definition. Okay. What are barriers to entry that lead to monopoly? There's three types generally. All right. So three of the answers are true, the other one's not. Okay. Ownership of a key resource, could that make a monopoly? Yeah. Declining average total cost curve for all quantities. What was that called? Natural. Government grants exclusive rights to produce a good. Yeah. So the only one left is A. All right. So this is A. What is a key difference between firms in a perfectly competitive versus a monopolistically competitive industry? Okay. So we said we have perfect competition versus monopolistic competition. Is it true that one difference is that marginal cost pricing versus markup? Okay, who prices at the marginal cost? Perfect competition, right? The price equals marginal cost. And we know the monopolistic competition has a markup above the marginal cost. Efficient scale versus excess capacity. Where did that have? Is that one of the differences between the two? Who produces at efficient scale? Perfect competition, right? We know in the long run, they're going to produce exactly where average total cost is minimized, right? The minimum of average total cost. That's not going to be true for monopolistic competition. Even though they had zero profits, that was at the decreasing portion of average total cost. Remember? So there's the excess capacity there. Identical products versus slightly differentiated product. Is that a difference? Yeah. Identical is perfect, and the monopolistic power of monopolistic competition comes from the differentiation of the product. So all of the above. Okay, suppose there are no fixed costs. What is the deadweight loss due to monopoly? All right, monopoly, marginal cost is constant in this case. This is the demand, this is the marginal revenue. So basically, deadweight loss, that's all we need. Well, that's easy enough. We've done that a couple of times already. So we know monopolist is going to produce where marginal cost equals marginal revenue, which is here, charge that price. And the competitive industry, perfect competition, is going to produce here at that quantity 14 and price of 10. And deadweight loss, that's the difference in total surplus. True? That's that. All right, area of that triangle. This side is what? This is a right triangle in this case because marginal cost is constant. This is 7, right? Because this is the quantity in monopoly is 7, quantity in perfect is 14, so that side is 7 and that side is 7 as well. So the deadweight loss would be 7 times 7 divided by 2, or 24.5. Right? This is straightforward. So the answer is C. All right. We have a firm with total cost of that formula and marginal cost of 6 plus 2q. If the firm is perfectly competitive, what is its exit price? All right, exit price. How can we find the exit price? Perfect competition. Exit price is where what and what happens. Where marginal cost equals average total cost. And what was shutdown price? It was where marginal cost equals the shutdown price is where marginal cost equals what? Average variable cost. All right, keep those straight, guys. Exit price is where marginal cost equals average total cost, and then shutdown is where marginal cost equals average variable cost. And this is long run, and this is short run. All right, so I'm asked about the exit price. It happens at the quantity where marginal cost equals average total cost. Well, marginal cost I know is 6 plus 2q, but what is average total cost? Not exactly. Average total cost is equal to total cost divided by q. Right, by definition. I have total cost, so it's 64 divided by q plus 6 plus q. Right, that's average total. Now I'm going to set them equal to each other. From where I'm going to find the quantity, right, the exit quantity. Now I'm going to plug it back in and find the exit price. Okay? So I have 6 plus 2q equals 64 divided by q plus 6 plus q. 6's go away, right? And then if I subtract q from both sides, I would get q equals 64 over q. I'll cross multiply. I get q squared equals 64. Therefore, q is what? Or? There's two solutions here, right? I have a quadratic equation. So it's either -8 or 8. Right? Both of them are going to be true. However, we know that negative quantities don't make sense in this scenario. Right? So the profit maxima, or the quantity at the exit price is going to be 8. Then plug it in either of the two equations, and you get the price. Okay? So if I take this quantity and plug it back in the marginal cost curve, it's 6 plus 2 times 8, so it's 22. Therefore, exit price 22. Which is C. Okay. So now we have a monopolist we have a monopolist that is facing the demand curve 36 minus 2q, and the costs are the same. So marginal cost is 6 plus 2q, and total cost is still that, 64 plus 6q plus q squared. What is the firm's profit maximizing price?
You said what you said, like the one and the marginal cost given to 36 minus 4q.
Exactly. So the rule that maximizes quantity, right? That's not right. The quantity that maximizes profit is found at the intersection of marginal cost and marginal revenue. I've solved this problem like that before. So I need to find the quantity that will make marginal cost equal to marginal revenue, for which I need to find marginal revenue first, right? I have the demand curve. This is monopoly, so marginal revenue I know is going to have the same intercept of 36, but it's going to have twice the slope. So marginal revenue is going to be 36 minus 4q. And then I'll plug that here. I know the marginal cost from, I'm given that. So I'll set those equal to each other. So for the quantity, and I'm actually, well, then we'll see what happens. All right. So 6 plus 2q, which is my marginal cost, equals marginal revenue, which is 36 minus 4q. So what do we have? Q is 5, right? It's 6q equals 30, or the profit maximizing quantity is 5. Okay. Now how do I find the profit maximizing price? Which, plug it in where? All right, so marginal revenue, MC, those are some of the answers. Is that right? It's B, right? So they remember the graph. This is marginal cost, this is the demand curve, and this is marginal revenue. I first set marginal revenue equals to marginal cost to find the quantity, but then having the quantity, the price comes from the demand curve, right? Not from, if I plug it in the marginal revenue or the marginal cost curve, that's 5, I'm going to find what this is. But I don't, that's not the price, right? The price comes going further up the intersection with the demand curve. Okay? So at a quantity of 5, the price would be 36, right? The demand curve now. 36 minus 2 times 5, or 26, which is A. Agreed? All right. That's the last, I think. Yeah, the last question. So, again, a monopolist facing that same demand curve. What is the profit? All right. So what I know is if they're monopolists facing that demand curve, they're going to produce quantity of 5, and they're going to charge a price of 26. Right? These are the pieces of information that I have. I'm after profit. So profit is total revenue minus total cost. I do have the total cost formula, and I know that quantity is 5. All right, so I can just plug in 5 there, solve, and see what total cost is. Total revenue, what was the price? 26? 26 times 5, that would give me my total revenue. Minus, and then total cost, I would just plug in 5 in that formula. And that is 64 plus, and this is 6 times 5, plus 5 squared. And that's all there is to it. So that's what, 130 minus 64, 94, and 25, 119. Profit of 11. Any questions?
So
mostly from 14 to 17.
I'm not sure. You have the list of topics, right? She put it on Piazza.
So it's cumulative, but there's not so much in the last exam.
There is some from last exams too, but I'm not sure how much. Percentage-wise, I'm not sure how many questions there are. All right, guys. Good luck. This is the last time I guess we see each other. So fingers crossed and enjoy your summer.